Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Welcome. My name is Jabari Gray, and I am the Executive Director of Youth Radio. Thank you. And we'd like to welcome you all here. We're excited to start our new Youth Radio Solution Series here tonight with you all, and have you help us kick it off in the right way. In the coming year, we'll be hosting similar panel events like this one to talk about big issues facing our communities and talk about them in new ways. Gentrification, mental health, the juvenile justice system, and the upcoming midterm elections. So for those of you who don't know us, Youth Radio is a nonprofit media production company. Our mission is to prepare diverse young people ages 14 to 24 for the 21st century digital and creative workplace. We do that by offering them hands-on education and employment in journalism, arts, and technology. We also offer all the young people who come through our doors access to support services. I'm winking at our board member, Marley Milliken, who helps us lead that charge. We have academic advising and mental health care that every young person who comes to Youth Radio has free access to. While going through our journalism and arts programming, our participants partner with news and music industry professionals and outlets including NPR, the New York Times, and Teen Vogue. And their work is amplified to audiences of millions. So we really appreciate your support in coming here tonight, because every time that we're having an event like this, it builds community, and that community helps propel our work forward. And while our heart and headquarters is here in Oakland, we've been at 17th and Broadway for the last 10 years, we're growing a national network of young journalists and artists who are sharing their voices and changing conversations on the grand scale. So thanks again for coming, and we hope this and our upcoming events spark conversations that you will take out to your own networks and communities. So before I introduce one of the key players in tonight's event, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. For those who need to take a bio break, there is a restroom out this door here, down this hallway, so you can go out to the left and hang a right. And that is a non-binary bathroom. Now, upstairs we do have binary restrooms for male and female folks who identify in those regards. So just wanted to let you know that as well. So tonight we're especially excited to welcome a colleague and a dear friend to not only Youth Radio, but to me. This is NPR's Sonari Glinton. Please, warm welcome. Hey.
Well, I wanted to, before you get started, I just wanted to say this came about for two reasons. One, I realized something had changed in Oakland when, you don't remember this, let's switch places. So, because he has to exit the stage at some point.
Sooner than later.
Yeah, sooner than later. When I was like, Jabari, I need a haircut. I was like, dude, I gotta get a haircut. He's like, I'll show you a haircut place. And so he takes me to this place, and I sit down, and you don't see this terrible, like, George Jefferson wannabe haircut. And it was $40. $40 for a haircut. And I was like, how is it possible that, for a black man, I should just say, a haircut should not be $40. That's not a thing. And I was like,
$15, $20.
Yeah, $15, $20. I was like, how is it possible I can get a $20 haircut in West Hollywood, but in downtown Oakland, I gotta pay $40? And then, that was the same day that, is there this photo that, so this was, and this is your cue to leave, because we're gonna start here, we were all walking through the neighborhood, and right around this time that this photo was taken, and I was looking at some amazing building that had gone up, and one of the young people, Anastasia actually, she said to me, oh no, this is not for you. Like, what are you looking at? Like, why are you like, stop every time you look, like, could you stop? We need to get to youth radio. Stop looking at this, like, these stupid buildings that are not for you. She probably didn't call me stupid. But that was the moment where you realize this is not for you. And I thought that when a teenager understood that was an amazing thing, much greater than me. And so I know some of you have heard about NPR surveils in the world of journalism, and I'll say this, here at Youth Radio, we are working to make the world that I work in more diverse. With LA on fire, with trouble in the Middle East, with North Korea ad nauseum, etc. This is a time for more journalism, not less. You can leave. Just sit down.
I was trying to be cool about it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And as I would say, that we need more journalism, not less. We need more of the work that people like Jabari. Congratulations, by the way, you got a promotion recently. And if you want to give, you can go to youthradio.org/donate. And also, if you feel like tweeting some of the interesting things you're going to hear, we have a hashtag, this is not for you. And, all right, so now it says, I've told the Anastasia story. All right, this year is the 50th anniversary of this song.
In the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, and then I'll watch them roll away again. Yeah, I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide.
I had a special experience. I met Otis Redding's daughter this summer. She runs a school and a camp for young people. She was really into media for young people and using that as a tool for teaching. And I realized when you're hearing Otis Redding singing there, he is not singing about San Francisco. He's singing about, well, he's singing about here, right? He's singing about this area. I left my home in Georgia heading for the Frisco Bay, which is, Otis Redding was gentrifying. That's the way I think about it, right? But it's not just Otis, it is all of these people who are drawn to this place, this area. Oakland holds a space in the Black community that's special. And I've been thinking a lot about Oakland and California. I'm from Chicago. And in Chicago, we like to call Chicago the capital of Black America. So since I decided that Chicago is the capital of Black America, and my relatives do, then Oakland is definitely the capital of Black America in the West Coast. It's probably even more than that. It's more than that, I know. But as you can see out the door, just walking here, Oakland is changing. And this change has been documented by NPR and, of course, by Youth Radio.
About the sick tap water in Flint, Michigan. That's what brought to our attention in the past 3 years.
That's not wrong. It's the next clip. I skipped over that.
The impact of the huge demographic shifts in America. They're focusing on Oakland, California, once a hub of West Coast African American culture.
In the 1940s and 50s, its music scene was dubbed the Harlem of the West.
In the 60s, the city gave birth to the Black Panther Party, and by the 80s, blacks made up nearly half the city's population.
Today, Oakland is one of the most diverse cities in the United States, but some worry that diversity is diluting its black cultural identity.
But when I asked Dave Ward what his dad, Sweet Jimmy, would say about Uptown Oakland in 2013, Ward says,
he couldn't say nothing, but I guess it's beautiful, but it ain't for black folks.
Bougie bars and restaurants dot the streets. They seem out of place in a neighborhood where many locals struggle to afford a cheap meal. It's like these businesses come into our communities only to exclude us. Oakland is my home, and I can't imagine leaving. But it hurts to see the culture I grew up with fade away. Because when the people who built this community leave, they take Oakland's spirit with them.
Children turned around and sold their mother houses and stuff. That was stupid. Now all these white people coming down here buying up all the houses, and I don't think that's right. So I'm staying right here where I'm at. I paid $15,000 for my house, and I'm staying right here. I ain't going nowhere.
The most critical part is when Uber lets Oakland move into Uber.
Because that's what'll make the difference in terms of equity, meaning Oaklanders having a real place at the table in tech companies, and not just for a weekly dinner. For NPR News, I'm Pendarvis Harshaw.
Now, as we heard, a lot of those stories about the coming gentrification in Oakland. But I want to tell you, gentrification is not coming. It's here. It isn't happening. It happened. And we have to think in part just a little bit about the history. Sometime in the 60s, our country went through a fundamental change. Mayors started wanting to do things like attract a tax base. And that was an opening not only for foreign investment, but looking at residents of a city in a different way. This put us all on the ladder, and because of race in America, it was about race. And the people on the lowest part of the ladder got kicked off. And it was just a little aside, I was in Chicago talking to friends of mine, and we all came from different neighborhoods of the city. You know, Lincoln Park, all these nice places, not as good places, and not one of my friends, there's 5 of us, black, white, not one of us could afford the neighborhood that we had grown up in. And we're talking NPR reporter, lawyers, doctors, and things like that. But there are global forces. It's not just black and white. London, Chicago, 40% of the homes in New York worth more than $3 million are vacant. What do you think that's about? They are owned, but vacant. In Detroit, you will see Chinese investors literally buy the busload. In Bel Air, which is burning right now, a house can go for $100 million. Now, I understand the economy, but you can't just talk about the economy when you're talking about gentrification. I'm an economic correspondent. Gentrification isn't just about money, it's about race, identity, space, culture, and that's why I've asked my very dear friend, Shereen Merisol Meraji.
Is this thing on? Merisol.
To join us. Shereen, come to the stage.
Hey, everybody.
Now, I wanted to talk to you because in my brain, when I think Oakland, I think Shereen. But that is, she's not necessarily from here. She hasn't lived here in how long?
I haven't lived here in 10 years. I'm actually from the sterile Sacramento suburbs. Yeah. Just to be clear, I moved to Oakland when I was 18. It was 1996. I lived and worked here, full-time worked here while I put myself through school at San Francisco State. I was a Rasta Studies major at San Francisco State. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I was thinking, and we've argued, had discussions about this, and our understanding of what gentrification has meant has grown and changed. Partially, I have changed because I thought I grew up in one of these neighborhoods where I was like, yeah, gentrification ain't never coming to my neighborhood, right? And literally, this is happening right now. President Obama is building a library in my neighborhood, and the 2 important parks in my neighborhood, Tiger Woods is taking over them. And everyone in our neighborhood is like, this is not for us. This is not for us. And it literally is a physical feeling. When I'm like, South Shore? Like, all the pain and the blood and the money that people put into these neighborhoods. And you're like, oh, you can't just erase it by like economic forces are like sweeping this away. It's a deeply, deeply personal thing. And it's personal to me. When you see black women fighting the president, the black president, by the way, about gentrification, you know that something has changed, that something really big is happening.
But that, when we would have arguments,
I would say, I want to Starbucks in my neighborhood.
Let that happen, bring it on. And we talked about how bringing that on has consequences, and nobody talks about the consequences. So anyway, I think.
What is there to do? And that's part of what we're here. What can we do?
But I'm here, Sonari brought me here because I host a podcast about race and ethnicity on NPR called Code Switch. Does anybody listen to Code Switch? Oh, I'm so glad! And I honestly would not be working at NPR. I would not be doing race and ethnicity coverage if I hadn't come to Oakland, spent a decade in Oakland, from the mid-90s through the mid-aughts, and really learned how to love myself as a woman who's Puerto Rican and Iranian. I felt like this community embraced me for who I was, and it taught me about race and social justice, and this place taught me how to dance. I learned how to dance at the Alice. Rest in peace, Malanga. Rest in peace, Carlos Aceituno. And thank you, Regina Calloway, for teaching me how to dance. So Oakland is really special to me. And every time I come back here, I think, wow, this place has changed. And one of my first stories, I became a race reporter at NPR in 2013, and one of my first stories was talking about demographic change in Oakland. And actually, Michael O'Connor is in that story, and he's going to be up on the stage later. But I talked to Dave Sweets Ward. His dad was Sweet Jimmy, and he owned a place called Jimmy's. Does anyone remember Jimmy's? It was a black-owned establishment. He also owned a place called The Lamplight, which he opened in 1969. His investors at that blues club bar were Huey Newton and Melvin Newton. Those were his cousins. So I talked to his son about what was going on in Oakland and the demographic change, and you heard a little piece of what his son said earlier in that montage that Sonari played. He said, "This is beautiful," and then he paused, and then he said, "But it ain't for black folks." And so I just want to just do a couple data points before we bring our panelists onto the stage. Well, actually, we're going to bring Sonari onto the stage, but I just want to, sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Don't be.
How am I doing? Thank you. I need a little love from the audience. All right, so in that piece, we opened with, in the 80s, Oakland was nearly 50% black. In 2016, that percentage was 24%. Oakland's black population has decreased more than any other racial or ethnic group here. The median home price, here's another data point. The median home price in Oakland in 2011 was $420,000. Last year, it was $650,000.
And I looked, and that number
has gone up.
It's gone up, yes.
Yeah. Already this December, this month, Oakland has had the largest 1 and 2 bedroom monthly rental increase in the Bay Area. Oakland, its rents went up 5.1% in December. So those are some data points.
Yeah, and we wanted to not only put faces to some of what is happening, we wanted to get at least one Oakland native onto the stage. So
we'll have more than one.
We'll have more than one. So Sonai,
come up here. Sonai, I'll page him on.
Thank you.
All right, wait. Let me flip through my notes just to make sure I have everything right here. All right, so now I'll cable on.
Is it?
Sorry.
Yes.
All right, cool.
This is very off the cuff, very relaxed. All right. So Sonai actually has sort of unofficially become Oakland's gentrification beat reporter.
I don't know. I'm youth radio's racism correspondent and gentrification correspondent, unofficially, but I should get a title and a raise.
So how did you get that beat? Why did it come to you, Sonai?
So basically what happened is that the newsroom and the interactive department had a meeting together where we talked about new topics for different stories and interactives, and this was, 4 years ago, something like that.
You were 16.
I was 16, so that was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Memory loss is getting old, man. It gets worse, trust me.
And this was when gentrification, it wasn't new, but it was newer. And it wasn't something that people were really talking about the way that I felt that they should have been. And I was assigned to that group's discussion with somebody else who was from West Oakland, and he was watching all the stuff happen. As I was watching the stuff happen, I was like, well, this is crazy. We have to talk about this. So we did, and we made West Side Stories.
And that's what you heard some of those stories. But I think that what's really funny about them is how earnest and uncomfortable some of the conversations, like honest and just like genuinely uncomfortable. And so Sonai did a bunch of interviews, and we wanted to play a couple of them. So
this was at an open house in West Oakland.
Yes,
People were looking to buy a home in West Oakland.
Oh, Meet a Gentrifier Day, my favorite.
That's how we called it. So let's play the first clip.
So where are you guys coming from, by the way?
Oakland.
And what kind of things are you looking for in houses?
So we're looking for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, or 2-bedroom, 1-bath.
Is there anything that's particularly attractive about this area?
I think West Oakland has the potential to go up in value more so than other areas. I think a lot of the houses here have really strong potential to appreciate.
Something that's at least move-in ready, and maybe
So what kind of things are you guys looking for in houses in this area?
I guess something that's at least move-in ready, and maybe a place where we can make some income, like having a Airbnb or a rental property.
Yeah, I think that's the same for me, in a neighborhood that maybe has a little bit more diversity, a little bit more flavor than what we've been able to find in the San Francisco side.
I say when you I hear people twittering when you hear that. What do you think when you hear that piece of tape back?
If you wanted to know why San Francisco doesn't have any flavor diversity, it's because they're like 10 gentrification steps ahead of us. So it's bad.
I mean,
I'm sorry. I just thought, like, the things you heard: a home that will appreciate, a rental property,
Airbnb,
and flavor.
Yeah, but those global forces, right?
Hard R.
Like, there's huge things. I mean, what about the work that you do? I mean, you're an artist here. Like, how does gentrification and the stuff that you've done with youth radio affect your work? You have a clothing brand, et cetera, et cetera. How does it affect your art?
Okay, so gentrification has kind of informed my practice in a sense to where I feel like I have to go out of my way to educate people and to kind of preserve the culture of Oakland, and to make sure that Oakland's businesses are taken care of, that Oakland's people are taken care of in a way that I wouldn't have to if gentrification wasn't happening. So is this the mural time? Is it mural time?
And so this is one of your works, which is really cool. It's at a liquor store, is that?
Yeah, I didn't.
Can everybody see it?
Okay, so this mural is in West Oakland. It was literally unveiled, Sunday? It's Thursday.
Oh, wow.
And it's like a block from my house. And this is one of 10 murals that we plan to do, commemorating the Black Panther Party. That's Huey Newton, the co-founder there. And then there's 2 people there, rank and file Panthers, a part of the free breakfast program. Old guy's name is Joseph. He's not old in the picture, but he's old now, and he's really nice. And this is on the side of a liquor store, which, if you know anything about urban communities, liquor stores are kind of hubs for negative energy because they sell unhealthy things, and that's where all people go for, alcohol and cigarettes and things that aren't great for you.
But fun.
I can't say that.
Don't look at me.
Anyway, it's but we wanted to transform the visual landscape of our community for something more positive, and also to kind of preserve the culture of West Oakland, because I don't know if you guys have been down there recently, but it doesn't look like it used to, and there's a lot of people being pushed out. There's a lot of cultural erasure, especially with the legacy of the Black Panther Party. So myself, running Merisol Future, it's my clothing company. That's my coat in that picture. And then Oakland Maroons Art Collective and Merisol Art put this mural together. And we even had a friend of ours fly out from France to paint some of the faces, because he loves Oakland and he loves the Black community here that much to do that.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well,
I really want.
Yeah.
There's something that Sonai that you said about this mural that actually almost broke my heart, and I wish. Do you mind repeating it? Okay.
Yeah. So basically, we were talking about this earlier, and this mural is really beautiful because of the messages that it has, and we made it for the community that's kind of leaving West Oakland now. But the really sad thing after I finished this mural is that I realized that this mural is going to outlive the Black community in West Oakland, and this mural's about that community, and the community is not going to be around to see the end of it. So, well, maybe, I don't know. something happens, magic.
Well, that is what we're
magic. Let's hope it's
well, not necessarily magic. That's where we begin our conversation, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen? Well, I mean, is that an eventuality that will definitely happen, right? One of the other things, just before I leave the stage, just want to say is that the other thing that I realized was there's nothing when people go someplace, right? When you say they're going to move out, but move to where? Right? And you think, oh, well, maybe move to the suburbs. It was like, suburbs are cheap. But then you realize, oh, the services for elderly people, the people who don't have as much money. Like youth radio does not necessarily makes it much harder. All the things that surround people in a city are much harder when we move to the suburbs. So that's not really an answer. So anyway.
And the suburbs were built to isolate people. I mean, you have these very individual lives, and you're not functioning in a community environment. I know I grew up in the suburbs.
And so
miserable.
So how do we create that? Create solutions. If you guys can take a seat, and we can.
I'm gonna intro everybody, and then they're gonna come up. All right. So we wanted to have a conversation about what we could do to make sure that the sad thing that Sonai just said doesn't actually happen, and that his mural isn't the lasting legacy of the Black community here in Oakland or of diversity here in Oakland because of gentrification. And this is a conversation. This is going to be a discussion. We're going to include people from the audience. And if you thought that you were going to leave with hardcore answers, that's probably not going to happen, sorry. But this is an ongoing conversation that I think we need to have. And I wanted to start with a place that is a little more, I don't know if the word is esoteric, but this book, How to Kill a City, Gentrification, Inequality, and the Fight for the Neighborhood, is kind of my inspiration for where I want to start this conversation. And I'm just going to read one quote from this before we get started. And the quote is, "If we're committed to fighting for an ungentrified future, the first step is to build consensus about what a city should be." And I think that we have a lot of different thoughts and feelings about that. And so I have 5 panelists up here, including Sonai, and we're gonna talk about that. What should Oakland be? What should Oakland look like? Cheney Turner's here. She's an Oakland native and entrepreneur. She owns Town Biz, an Oakland Pride apparel and art space. Let's welcome her to the stage. Thank you, Cheney. Okay, I'm gonna keep going, sorry. Selene Chavez in the house. She's a housing organizer with Causa Justa here in Oakland. She's originally from Ecuador, but grew up in Southern California. She's been in Oakland for a handful of years. Michael O'Connor's the owner of The New Parish. It's an independent concert venue in Uptown Oakland. He's owned the venue for 9 years. Michael's a San Francisco native. You can boo if you want to. Just kidding. And Darlene Flynn's in the house. She's the director of the City of Oakland's Department of Race and Equity. It's been around for a year, and her department is tasked with tackling structural and institutional racism in city government here in Oakland, which is a really big job. And Darlene moved from Seattle last year to do it.
And I'm here in the audience. I will be taking your questions. So if, as the conversation gets going, you have something to say, just get my attention, all right?
All right, so we've got some Oakland natives up here, some transplants, business owners, organizers. The city is represented. We got youth radio with Sonai. All of you in the audience. So like I said, I was inspired to start this conversation from this book, How to Kill a City. And the quote is, "If we are committed to fighting for an ungentrified future, the first step is to build consensus about what that city should be." And the first question that I'm going to throw out there is, for the panelists, what to you is special about Oakland? What makes Oakland special? What makes Oakland Oakland? And I want this to be kind of free form and fun. So whoever wants to start. Cheney, you want to start?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me tonight. Oakland is a special place. Oakland is a special place because it is flavor, you know. It's the diversity, you know, the resilience and the resistance of the people, you know, here. I think all of those really make Oakland special.
Yeah, everything she said, but you know, Oakland has a lot of culture and it has a lot of resistance, as she said. Like there's so many, you know, youth programs and organizations doing good things to the community and different kinds of people and food. Like you can get Burmese food and Samoan food, and like you can't get those in places that are not special like Oakland. So yeah.
Hey folks. Well, all of us make it beautiful, right? The diversity, as folks have already said, not only the diversity of culture and race, but of, you know, gender and politics and art. And I think something that I've been learning, I'm a transplant, but something that I have been learning is that the history of the Black Panthers and the organizing and the resistance is really still alive in ways that you can't find in other cities. So that kind of makes it even more beautiful, and definitely a safe place too, in a lot of those regards as well. Yeah.
You all right there?
Yeah. I wasn't sure if it was on or not. So. I would agree with everybody, but I would also add that some of the things that make Oakland great is affordability, and it has been affordable, and that's part of what we're talking about here is how do we retain that, especially people who are involved in housing. Renters' rights are incredibly important to preserve that, and it's that which allows people to live and to express themselves in the arts or in activism or in all kinds of things. Another thing that I've been thinking more lately is, you know, I'm from San Francisco, but went to school at Berkeley, studied housing and architecture and planning, and kind of realized, wow, the East Bay is awesome, and it's in a lot of ways better than San Francisco, and now it truly is, and we all kind of know that. And one thing that's come to light recently, and I think the Warriors, for example, are in for a rude awakening, is Oakland is the center of the Bay Area, geographically, energy-wise. You know, when you talk about the entire Bay Area, this is the center. San Francisco isn't, but Oakland is just a great place.
Well, I'm new here, and so I feel like I have fresh eyes in a lot of ways. But I'm from the West Coast, and I can absolutely tell you that Oakland is the Black capital of the West Coast. As a woman who grew up in the very white city of Seattle, Seattle was also had the first chapter of the Black Panthers outside of Oakland, California. So there's a very strong connection between the Black community in Seattle and the Black community here in Oakland. So I knew all of that intellectually before I got here, but I was not prepared for what the city felt like when I stepped off of BART coming from the airport. The soul of this city is in the air, and it still blew me away how at home I felt. Even though I was completely lost and had no idea where I was. I've only ever lived in one city, really, in my whole life, and that's Seattle. So this was a strange place, and yet at the same time, a familiar place. And the best way I can describe that, what I think I was feeling, was the blackness of this city, and the way this city has been shaped by its Black history, both civil rights and otherwise, is palpable. And it's something that the white folks here enjoy too. And so it's mine and it's ours, and every day that I live here, I feel it more strongly.
Is that in danger of changing? Oakland natives, do you want to weigh in? Do you feel like that's changing?
Yeah, as far as like Oakland being special, or the things that make Oakland,
the culture.
Yeah, of course. You know, I mean, as a Black person and Native, it's kind of hard, you know, not to ignore. I mean, I was at a restaurant day before yesterday, and it was myself and one other Black person. And I'm like, how is this possible? You know, now that I'm downtown and it's just myself and one other Black person, and everybody in here is white. You know, you see it every day. Like, you know, you're aware of it, you know, just walking, you know, down the street. So, the visibility of Black people, I don't feel like this is the Black capital of the West Coast because we're not here. And if we are, that's really sad, because that just tells me that other places we're non-existent as well.
Does anyone want to jump in there?
I mean, and I think we also see that in the newspapers and stuff, and how Black folks are being criminalized in Oakland these days, right? From folks not being able to play drums in the lake, to churches being shut down on Sunday because they're being too loud, to restaurants being closed because they're not following, city codes, even though they've been open for years and years. So those are the ways that are systematically pushing people out in a way that isn't just about housing, right? It's other ways that gentrification is showing up and making it not safe for Black folks.
Right. So. And just the other day, and we can even add, sideshows to that. People are like trying to get rid of sideshows and, close them down. Regardless of what your personal opinion might be, sideshows have always historically been a part of Oakland culture and Bay Area culture. And actually, I won't even say, Black culture, because they started off like in the 50s and, white folks, showing off their cars, at the drive-ins, and they just kind of evolved. And it did, turn into, Black culture. But when you shut institutions down or try to dismantle cultural events, regardless of if they're of the city or just of the people, you're erasing the culture. And we continue to see that here, even with like some of the festivals that we have. Like we no longer have Festival at the Lake. We have no longer have Karijama, and we can go on and on and on. And we have a lot of new events that are not really catered to Oakland natives, residents of Oakland, or people who have like really lived here. They're pretty much catered to the new Oaklanders.
So Nene, I wanted to talk to you about you're doing organizing. And Michael brought up affordability and the fact that affordability was something that made Oakland special and that allowed there to be this diversity in Oakland, housing affordability. The clients that you work with are Latino immigrants, a lot of Latino immigrants. Yeah. Can we talk about what are you doing to provide a solution to the affordability issue in Oakland? How are you organizing? What's happening?
Yeah, so I'm gonna just go back and then come to this question. So this weekend we had someone that we've been organizing who has been talking in city council for the last 2 months around some ordinance that we're trying to pass in Oakland. And they were moving to Pinole, right? After being here 10 years, they were living in East 14th and 81st Street. And they're moving to Pinole. And so folks are having to organize and start to think about ways to connect to the people that are in the suburbs now, because we're not all here, like folks said earlier. And so that's just something to think about in the ways that we are organizing and the way that we are building resilience in the community. Is now we also have to be thinking about the people that have been pushed out, and how do we connect those folks to the services and to the opportunities that we still have here in the city, right? And so the way that we are organizing is making sure that we are providing services to people right on the ground. So we have a very serve the people model, very, very much like the Black Panthers, and that's as a way to make sure that people are getting those needs. A lot of the evictions and all of the ways that people are being displaced are illegal, are being through harassment and things of that sort, criminalization. And then we're also making sure that people start realizing their power within their city, right? Like realizing their power in council meetings, realizing their power outside of council meetings and in the streets, and when things happen, making sure that folks know that each time something happens that is going to push them away, they're pushing back and with their neighbors, with their communities, and direct actions and things like that. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest ways to do this, is to organize it and is to resist in a big way, because the Black and brown folks that are leaving are low income, working class, but they do have people power, right?
Can I ask a question from here? What does that resistance look like? I mean, in a tangible way.
Yeah, so we actually have stopped many evictions from happening because people have shown up, right? This Sunday there's going to be someone showing up to an old resident from North Oakland, and we're trying to get about 200 people to go and show up and kind of tell their landlords hey, this person has done so much things in the community. They've been in Oakland all their lives. Like, why do you think you should push this person out? And I think that's a way that we can do that, is actually showing up for our neighbors, showing up for our friends, and telling the folks that are pushing them out, like, why it's important to keep them there. And we don't do that enough, right? Because it's kind of, people don't really talk about housing issues outside of their closest friends and families, but if we did, and we could show up for each other, I think it would be a big difference.
Michael, I mean, you were involved in city council stuff in San Francisco, and how did that work? Because we know San Francisco looks very different than it did.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what the template for what's going on in Oakland, or what's been starting to go on, and what's going to go on more quickly, hopefully not, but possibly, has already happened in San Francisco, and that's where you can see the footprints, and it's horrible. And the people, the San Francisco natives, particularly, who lean towards like an interracial kind of environment, they all come to Oakland now. They might live in San Francisco, but everybody has to come to Oakland because this is where, while we are talking about gentrification, we are talking about people getting pushed out, and it's real. It's still far better than where things are at in San Francisco now, which is horrible.
Did you learn anything from doing that work? I mean, you were trying to be a part of the solution. You were trying to fight that in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, I sat on some city commissions and panels. I ran for city council once when I was kind of like a neophyte and didn't know that much about the political process, and I was getting ready to run again, which I think I would have won. However, I didn't love San Francisco anymore because of what I saw. And that's the problem, is that people, if you love Oakland, you gotta fight now. Or else in 5 years it'll be too late. But what does that look like? It has to come in the form of affordability. The mayor's office, the developers, everybody has to get behind, okay, if you're gonna build X amount of for-profit units, you have to get behind a higher than typical amount of affordable units. We have to provide renters' rights. We have to provide defense for evictions, which is super important. And just send out the message that this is not just for speculation. And ultimately, that's what this is all about. Are we going to emphasize people and culture? Are we going to emphasize profits and real estate speculation?
Darlene, what's the city doing to promote more of these policies? I guess anti-gentrification policies. Is the city doing anything, or is your office kind of tasked with pushing the city in that direction?
So the Department of Race and Equity really has a different kind of charge. All of these things are so important, the immediate action and the availability of affordable housing. And of course, 2 bond measures just got passed, one on the county level and one at the city level, to build more affordable housing in the city of Oakland. I mean, the thing about affordable housing is it has to be subsidized, and it has to be heavily subsidized. The more expensive the underlying land is, the more speculation that's going on, the more pressure there is on the market, the more expensive it is for government to provide housing at an affordable level. So we're constantly looking for money to do that, to provide more and more and more, and leverage and opportunities to encourage private developers even to include affordable units in their developments as well. The work of the city through my department, though, is to look at how the inequities that place people of color disproportionately at a disadvantage historically continue to disadvantage the same communities over and over and over again. This is not the first time in this country that there was something desirable that wasn't for Black folks. That is the history of Blackness in the United States of America. When Oakland was a Black city, it was a city that white people didn't want. It was a red-lined city that was mostly, at least in the flats, red-lined for people of color. And so now that it's desirable, people who have a choice economically can take it back. They can take it back. It's theirs now because they can afford to take it back. So this is about economic disenfranchisement, marginalization that goes back hundreds of years. So this is the work that we're focusing on, is how is government, including city government, how is government implicated now at perpetuating those disadvantages for communities of color, and specifically the city of Oakland. And that's a different kind of proposition. It's not a quick, fast thing, but it's about eventually finding our way to a country that is for everybody, where people are not marginalized based on race and where their opportunities aren't profoundly different from birth forward based on their racial identity. So we're working on looking at city policies, practices, and procedures, decisions that the council makes and that others in the city make that work well for certain populations and continue to work poorly for others. So it is about being able to analyze our own work, how we approach it, how we prioritize, what we invest in, where we invest, where we have disinvested over the years in the history of Oakland, and how we can make that more equitable going forward. So it doesn't fix the immediate problem, but it goes for the real fix, and that is to situate people of color, including Black folks, in such a way that they're not just pushed around by the markets forever. Because that's the position that we're in. Low-income people, people of color, are disproportionately poor, will always be subjected to the whims of the market until we are part of the market, till we are able to live in this country on the same basis as white folks.
Can you both talk, Cheney and Sonari, can you talk about solutions when it comes to cultural, artistic resistance, like what you're doing to resist what's happening, the demographic change, in a cultural and artistic way, like with your work?
Sure. Before I answer that,
oh, sorry.
I just want to say that Black folks in Oakland won't be able to be a part of the buyer's market until the city invests more. If you don't have an education, you can't purchase a home. Yesterday, or was it today, teachers' checks bounced, and so we can't get to having, equity until we get to the actual root of the problem, which is investment in youth and investment in our schools. Our schools have always been at the bottom, and as someone who is a product of OUSD, I've never felt that the city or OUSD really wanted to invest in me as a Black child from East Oakland. And so until we can really get there and have real programs and not these Band-Aid programs that they keep throwing out, we won't have equity. We won't be able to purchase until we invest in the kids who are here and not new kids who are coming here. I'm talking about kids who are born and raised here who are in schools that have no supplies at the moment. Can you repeat your question?
Oh, no, great. Keep going. I was just talking about art and cultural resistance, and the work that you're doing.
Well, aside from Town Biz, I also have a event production company, which is called Social Life Productions. And I've been doing that for about 15 years, producing events in Oakland. I work closely with the new parish and many venues here in Oakland. And it's hard, it's hard as people continue to leave to continue to create these platforms. And I'm very vocal about the events that I do. They are for people of color, queer people of color. And so, but the makeup of nightlife is, life period here in Oakland is changing. You can go across the street to the Fox Theater. When was the last time they held a hip hop show or a program that catered to Black or brown audiences? A lot of the larger venues now are not catering to that demographic of people. We're seeing folks that I've never even heard of that people travel to Oakland, pay to go see. But we're working hard. Sonai, I carry his clothing line in my store. People love it. It feels good to wear his clothing. You have a sense of pride as a person from Oakland, and feeling that it's ours. Everyone can't wear his clothes because they don't understand it. And if you don't understand the history of the Panthers or the message in the clothing, then it's not for you. And so it's good to have that. For young folks and old people. His line, goes across the, demographic lines for people who are here. But, with clothes, nightlife, and, we have people out in the community that are still trying to keep the arts. If you walk around here, there's art everywhere. And unfortunately, like he said, a lot of this art will outlive us, but that's the beauty of art, right? Because people could continue to tell that story of, of the murals, of Panthers and all the different art and artists that we still have here. So I'm grateful that there's people, like him and his father and other artists that's like, keeping the spirit of Oakland alive through art.
So Shani kind of explained what I do already, but I just wanted to add, on top of about the school thing, is that when gentrification happens, like I talked about earlier about how Oakland has all of these really great programs, like Youth Radio, for example, and there's a lot of programs not necessarily doing the same work that Youth Radio does, but trying to help the same disadvantaged groups of Oakland youth. And when those Oakland youth are, pushed to places like Antioch, to Pittsburgh, to Stockton, they can't come back and get these programs. They don't have those programs in these dusty suburban in these distant suburban places that, like they can't come and access these programs. And these kinds of programs really, really push youth forward. There's people here who are learning how to do things that now they have these marketable skills. I mean, Youth Radio has changed my life, like individually. Like I spoke at MIT, which is like something that I wouldn't have on my resume if like I didn't come to Youth Radio, and just like other really amazing things. And if they're pushed out, like they can't come and do these things, which just pushes the people on the bottom of the ladder lower on the ladder until they're just in the, like a C, what's below the ladder? There's like a C below the ladder, yeah. And it's not good. And then on another note about the ways that we are making changes in Oakland, I said the thing about the mural outliving the Black community in West Oakland, and my father was the lead artist on this mural, and in the earlier stages of us doing it, I was like, why are we doing this? The Black people that you want to make this art for aren't here anymore. But as we were working on it, I'd be on the wall painting, and some Black people would come out, and the look on their faces and communicating with them and seeing how inspired they are to love the community more, to love themselves more, to love their people more, like it's not over. And I think working on this project in particular showed me that. Like at our unveiling on Sunday, I didn't expect a lot of people to come, but there was like a huge crowd in the street, and everybody was really happy about this work of art that shifted the visual landscape and shifted the way people look at themselves and at their communities. And I think that work like that, as an artist, because that's my lane, is what we need to be doing. And I feel like if you're an artist in Oakland and you're not making work to uplift your community, then you're being irresponsible, because you're kind of just like not wasting, because there's other things that art can do, but you are neglecting a community that supported you, a community that supported your art. And none of us would be here if it were not for the support of our communities, especially me. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things I wonder, I'm gonna get questions, so if people have them, you can.
Or if you want to say something and add ideas.
Yeah, please, or question or idea or something.
But I can definitely make efforts to improve the quality of life of the people affected, because really that's what it comes down to. Like it's not about the land, it's about the people. And if the people are taken care of and the people can, try to maintain some space, cultural space, physical space, all these kinds of spaces, then I think that we can hold on.
Is it inevitable?
Well, I think change is inevitable. I think if, my father has passed away, but he was born in 1914 in southern Missouri. A lot of things have changed since then. I didn't have the life that he had. I didn't spend my childhood learning to step off of sidewalks and cast my eyes down at the ground so as not to look at somebody wrong and end up in big trouble, over that. So change happens, social change happens, and progress happens, and communities are born and reborn over and over again. I think the question is, are people of color ever going to become part of that future in a meaningful way? Full citizens, full access, equity and opportunity, so that the change that's benefiting other people benefits us. There's no reason why we have to be left behind. And as long as we're here, we will have art and we will have culture, and we will steward those things. And nobody can do it like Black people can do it. Nobody can do it like we can do it. The question is, are we going to continue to have our lives and our communities disrupted in such profound ways? And it's happening in this particular way now, but there was a time when they got burned to the ground, you know, and there's all kinds of ways that our communities have been disrupted in the history of this country. So this is a new kind of disruption that we're dealing with. It's a new form of disruption. And I think that underneath it all is the question of, will we, in this variation of the movement, push through to a new place where we have more say about what the future looks like wherever we are, wherever that might be. And I guess I would just add, I have been in government for a long time, and I came to government by way of politics. And I just have to say, people know who votes and who doesn't vote. I'm just going to say it. City is run by city government. This city, what they prioritize, what we spend our money on, those decisions are made by people who get voted into and voted out of office. So at the very least, a big part of this movement is getting those of all of us that want change, that want social change, that have been disenfranchised. In various parts of the country, people are prevented from voting. Here we just give up our power at the ballot box on the West Coast. So the same is true in Seattle, so I'm not picking on Oakland. If we want their attention, we have to show up where it matters to them.
Just dovetail that real quick. I always said in San Francisco, as well as anywhere, there's power in helping people get elected. There's also a lot of power in getting people unelected.
And I work, like I said, I work in East Oakland and I work in the Fruit Belt, and a lot of the people I work with and I organize actually can vote, but they can show up to council. They can still make calls, they can still write letters, they can still come with their full selves, with their neighbors, and really say something, right? So I do want to like just add that to the perspective that there is a lot of other ways that we can show our power as people and as people of color that doesn't just involve voting, but it also involves like holding those folks that are representing us accountable. And there's very many different ways to do that. So.
All right, from the audience?
Hi, everybody.
I'm going to have the microphone.
Okay. So thank you first for all being here. And I think my question is really more a conversation starter. I'm really curious how we can hold some of these larger companies accountable. It seems like these larger companies, big tech companies, are swooping in and there's zero regulation. There's nobody sitting at the table having conversations about how their presence is impacting all of us. Housing and resources. I mean, everything from groceries. I can't afford to live here much longer. I'm on my way out as well. And I was a social worker that fell in love with this city in 2005. And it embraced me so much more than my suburbs in Orange County ever could even think of doing. So I'm not going to be able to afford to live here much longer. And so I'm just curious how we can hold folks that are making these decisions and these companies that are being given incentives to swoop in and actually cause a lot of what's happening. Big businesses, tech companies, developers. Who's holding any of them accountable, or are they being incentivized to do it?
Well, I think I'm going to answer partially is I think one of the incentives is that when is this sort of this idea that governments have, local governments, it feels like that they're attracting a tax base, right? And it's like, well, like I feel like in Rome, the Roman mayor or the London mayor in 1450 was not thinking, how can I attract the tax base? It was like, how do I keep these people from killing these people, and how do I improve the life of the city? Like, and that's also the difference, I think, and use a Chicago example. There are two mayors of Chicago named Richard Daley. One essentially sold the city, like sold a lot of, sold off the parking meters and things like that in an effort to attract the tax base. His father was trying to keep as many people, just like keep people in and keep people happy. That's a problematic, simple distillation of these two politicians. But there's a huge shift that attracting the tax base instead of making the life better for the people who live in the city. And I wonder how we affect that change. But anyway, I didn't mean to talk as much. Someone up there on the panel.
I guess one of the solutions I think would be, having some of these companies actually invest real money. Someone like Uber was coming, they were trying to throw $1 million at Oakland. Really? Like, to me that was an insult. $1 million, that's like $10 to them, or less. It's like a penny, to them. And again, it's about being real, right? So the city needs to actually, have some real standards, for the companies. But and again, I'm only speaking for Oakland. To me, they were so busy trying to lure and attract Uber here, and completely forgot about the needs of the city and the people. I have no problem, with folks wanting to come to Oakland and start businesses, but investors, a lot of smart people here that live in this city and that could that use the services. We all use Uber here. Why not invest in the people that using the service, or adopt a school? Have some of these companies actually adopt a whole school and buy all of the supplies and all the computers, because they can write them off anyway. They're buying them for their companies. I used to work. I worked in procurement, for before. I know how all of that works. And so I just think that, again, it might sound phony, but just address the real needs, of the people. And I feel that, Libby and, a lot of folks, that's running the city don't take us into account. They don't take us into consideration when making these decisions on how the landscape of the city, is really going to change. 10 years ago, it was desolate down here. There was nothing. It was a complete desert. And but the difference between then and now is that the people are still struggling, right? And so 10 years ago, people were still struggling, and we're still struggling even more, just trying to stay afloat. So again, it all comes back to education being a part of it, and really investing and having these multi-million-dollar companies invest, hire interns, and give people jobs right out of school if that's what they want to do. So those are just a few ideas.
Does the race and equity department have any pull when it comes to this kind of stuff? Can you push city government?
I have more influence than pull, but I think that what I can do is ask the city to look at their decisions and analyze what their impacts are going to be on communities of color and those who are most marginalized. So that's what I teach people to do. If you go this way versus that way, who's harmed, who's helped, and who's getting further behind, and then change direction based on the impacts. And that's a really big step for a government to do. Normally that's not it. There's some other philosophical approach. I think that you're absolutely right. Where'd you go? That cities are chasing tax base. Cities all over the country are chasing tax base. That's not unique to Oakland. Look what's going on with Amazon's second headquarters right now. And I can tell you that Amazon's not a big gift. Amazon's headquartered in Seattle, Washington, pays no business tax. All the business taxes have been given back to Amazon because that was the deal for them to stay there and to be there and to build their business there. They use the services, they don't pay taxes, and they make huge, huge profits. So we have to just acknowledge that that's the system that we're working within, is like how to maximize profits for large corporations. I don't know that they're going to voluntarily give their money away, at least not in the way that we would be responsible, as far as I'm concerned. But I think that there is a way in which government can slightly adjust our approach, or maybe largely adjust our approach, so that we prioritize something different, so that we're not necessarily just reading from the same script, that we're taking other things into consideration rather than just tax base. What else happens? So one of the things I've been talking about a lot is cannabis, and people said, like if we have an equity program for cannabis licensing, it's going to slow down the tax revenue for the city because businesses aren't going to get licensed as fast. And what I've been talking to people a lot about is what's the cost of leaving people behind? What's the cost of leaving people out? We never calibrate that cost. What it costs the city government to perpetuate poverty and disenfranchisement. So we have to start thinking about the problem differently, and then we're going to have to be very creative. It is not a slam dunk. Even if I did have complete authority, which I don't, because there are far more powerful people in the city than I am, I would have to sit and think with a lot of like-minded people about how to proceed in a way that benefits us all more equitably, and that's really what I'm encouraging people inside the city to do. We're doing some movement building inside the city of Oakland about how we make decisions and what we think about as priorities while we're making those decisions. And if we're not thinking about the people, when those decisions are being made, then other things like tax base are going to carry the day. So we've got to shift our own philosophy, and I do believe that as we shift, we will be able to build a better city. And when we build a better city, Oakland's going to continue to be a place where business wants to be without us having to give it away. So,
a question here, or statement?
First and foremost, thank y'all so much for everything you shared. That was really important for me, particularly as a Black gentrifier. Like I'm not from here. I moved here very recently, and I've been coming to terms with that realization. But I really want to know, what can I do, particularly for the natives? Like, what can I do? What can all the white people in this space, what can they do to help? And I also want to add, I'm a firm believer in the power of the people, the power of the masses. And I've been hearing a lot of conversation about basically waiting for the government, who doesn't give a fuck about us, to help us out. And that was beautiful what you said, like 10 years ago we were struggling. 10 years ago all these things have changed, and a lot of people are getting rich, but we're still struggling because we're waiting for them to give a fuck, and they're not. So I really want to know, what can we do, how can I help, and how do we move forward?
The radio guy in me was like, oh, you said the F word like twice. Like, man, this is youth radio, man, come on. All right, anyway, go, sorry.
Yeah, I think I heard like doing research on the impact of the communities and things like that when we're talking about development and things. But I think we can just talk to people one-on-one and know that impact, right? So that's a lot of the ways that I've gotten to know Oakland, is through like the folks that we serve and that we support, and a lot of that impact around how development is impacting their families and themselves happen in the one-on-one conversations in the bar and the stores and things like that. So I just wanted to bring that. Research is obviously good, but there's also just the conversations with the people that are living here that I think would really help kind of think about that. And the other thing I want to say is, like, people are always thinking about bringing money into Oakland, but I think we can also try to invest in the things that keep the affordable housing that is here, right? Because there are people that are paying low rent in East Oakland and in Fruitvale and in West Oakland, and they are the ones getting pushed out. And so we can start thinking about how to keep those folks there, how to keep them rent controlled, how to keep them in their low rents. Then we also have a big pocket of affordability that we're not really thinking about, because when we think about developing and, you know, giving 30 out of 100 units for low income means a lot of different things first. But second of all, that's only thinking about like 10 years from now, 5 years from now, but we're not really thinking about the right now. And the right now is a lot of protecting people to allow them to stay here, right? And so helping out would mean, you know, door knock with us and make sure that we're passing protections for people here in Oakland around housing, making sure that we're investing in Black-owned businesses, people of color owned businesses, and investing in schools. So those are some of the things that I would think of.
Yeah, I would say some of the same things. And thank you for, you know, addressing that you are a Black gentrifier, because I think that that's one thing that we don't talk about is we look at white folks and automatically like, well, you're the gentrifier. It's more, it's more that, yes, race has a part to do, has something to do with it, but, you know, you also have Black people that move here that, with privileged incomes as well, that, price people out, or, just people in general. So I think that's a conversation that we need to have. But for anyone that is like new to Oakland and moving to Oakland, one thing that makes Oakland unique and beautiful is that, the people are really involved, we're really involved, and we love our city, and so I would say finding, an organization. Of course, you have Just Cause, you have ACE, you have BLM Bay Area out here, and yes, supporting, Black-owned restaurants, businesses like, Town Biz, and Miss Ollie's, and like all types of different restaurants, getting a part of a program where maybe you could, tutor youth or, or something. There's plenty of things to do here. Become a part of the community, and by becoming a part of the community, that means working and supporting those who are already here doing that work.
And, on top of that, I think a certain mindfulness is like really the place to begin. And it's good that you asked that question, because a lot of people come into our neighborhoods and they don't ask what they can do to benefit the community. They don't ask, oh, I'm doing this thing that's a part of this greater system. How do I not perpetuate the system, or what is there that I can do. So I really appreciate that. And really, I feel like a lot of people need to, it's really like that awareness is the place to start. And I was gonna say something else, and there's something else to say, but it's not coming out.
Well, I have a question out here.
So somebody's gonna ask a question.
Hi. One of the things that I've been seeing, I've been doing this work for a long time, and it starts at the planning phase. And so this week I met with Joshua Simon of Ibalsi, and I was talking to him about why do we have so many affordable housing for rental? That creates a poverty trap. And when we should be talking about BMRs for purchase, where you were talking about deep investment.
BMRs.
So below market rate units. So any of the new properties. So I talked with Mr. Simon because the fact is most of this uptown is most of his developments. And I said, we really need to get to a point where we're getting people that they have home ownership. And that, and then I talked when the hub opened. I had a lot of talks with folks there. I said, look, we've got to get this economic development office to be, giving grants out, not debt, to start businesses. So some of the things that, and it's been interesting, like when you all mentioned that, Uber was given $1 million, or given money, or these other companies. And if we did put that, and so the thing is, what can we do? Because I've been having conversations with folks, bringing up, going to see them at their offices, talking to them about why aren't they in Sacramento and in DC? Because if I can get on a plane, I know they can, and bring this money, here. And, this is the kind of, the new conversation is about architecture, planning, and these fields where we need to be. And so, getting us involved in making sure that we're at the table and we're the architects, we're the planners, and making sure we're the green builders and folks like that. I don't know, my thing has been trying to figure out from the grassroots is to what can those of us who are at this level, what can we do more of to make sure that when money is available, that money is coming to those of you who are living here and working here. So my question is what is it that the folks that I'm not hitting and other people aren't hitting that is going to make this connection, and especially for the city. My team was chosen for startups and residents in Oakland, and we didn't even get out the gate. We couldn't, the city was like, yeah, but there were so many fighting inside of the city. And so it's like being grassroots and putting time in. What are the conversations that you're having with the mayor and the mayor staff on economic development and home ownership and things that would really move the needle?
Well, I'm going to say there are about 4 questions in there. One, and I do want to ask, the economics reporter in me is home ownership all that great? I just want to. I'm wondering, but we can. But I'll send it to you guys. Or anyone.
I think that home ownership should be an option. I'm not sure that it is going to be a sustainable model. I think there's just a lot of questions about that as a wealth building scheme. It certainly did work for a while. Things have changed dramatically. I don't know what the right answer is on that, but I think that in my mind the goal is to have, as my life is much different than my father's, I want my children's lives to be different than mine with regard to what kinds of options and opportunity they have. And there's no question that education is a huge piece of this because it's the gateway to economic opportunity if you can't get a decent education and higher education, which is why it has become harder and harder to do. It is the way that the shackles have been put back on, to defund public schools, to keep them in the conditions that they're in, and create a private school lane for others. It's the new version of it. So if we know that that's the problem, we know that that's something that's got to be fixed. We cannot keep electing people that think it is okay to defund public education. So that being said, I think what the city can do, because education is not what the city does, is look at our policies around economic development. And so we have just, our economic development department just passed a new economic development plan, which has numerous placeholders in it that are specific with regard to race and other issues that are challenging the city of Oakland around economic jobs, home ownership, small business opportunities, all the things that you talked about. there's placeholders in that economic development plan to address those inequities. Now it comes the hard work of figuring out how we're going to do that as a city and how we can open up more opportunities and remove some of the kinds of barriers that you were talking about that make it difficult for small businesses to get started. And by the way, when that happens, it's better for all small businesses, but it's especially important to small businesses that are being started by communities that have been historically marginalized. So this is what the work of my office is to work with them to look at how can we do things differently so that we get different outcomes for people that are trying to get started.
I mean, to the point of the gentrifier in the back, who was like,
the black gentrifier,
the
right?
Black gentrifier. I mean, what hasn't been discussed is getting out in the streets, agitating, being vocal, being outside. I mean, all I keep thinking about is San Francisco has one of the most robust tenants' rights in the whole United States. And look at what happened to San Francisco. Is this thing on? Anyway, I wasn't sure. No, but for real. But, you know, they had robust tenants' rights. There were things that were happening behind the scenes. People were, you know, going to their local representatives and asking.
It's far stronger than in Oakland.
Yes.
And it still got dismantled there.
So, I mean, I just think that the point you made is really interesting. Yeah, does something have to be... And I don't, you know, I'm an objective journalist, so I'm just asking But does something have to be more vocal, out in the streets, organized, loud? You know, I mean, a housing rights movement, a movement that is not disparate, like all these disparate things, but something bigger. Is that the way that the needle is going to get moved? Because it feels like we have all of these examples of people trying in their own ways and getting steamrolled. I don't know.
And there's a strong need for new young leadership who are willing to lead that battle.
What's your name?
I reached out, based upon my experience, I reached out to a number of people in Oakland and said, hey, have you considered running? You know, we need people like you, Cheney. And a lot of people, but once you get in, you have to keep the fight up, and that's a hard thing to do. But you know, I wanted to speak to the point also is like public art is a huge important part of retaining presence. Like keep it going. That, you know, we need a lot more of that, a lot more outdoor events. Stuff like the example of the churches getting protested or getting complained upon for sound complaints, that's ridiculous. Or parking violations in the street when it's on a Sunday. No, we're going to keep doing what we've always done. And, you know, there's a lot of things, outdoor events I think are really important, marches, etc. That has worked to help define the existence of people who have been here are staying here.
And I think also most importantly, like actually bringing people to the table that that these organizations and the city is trying to represent, and listening. You know, there's too many people trying to make policies and stuff who aren't even low income. Right. You know, how can you define? And that's my problem with like low income and affordable housing. Yeah. It's not defined. That's right. Like what is actually affordable? You know, if I'm a teacher and I'm making $3,000 or $3,500 a month, I can't afford affordable housing. You understand? And so, and having people that you represent, you know, at the table, where are the poor people? You know, there's all working class folks, but no one from the street, no homeless people to actually, you know, listen and hear what the actual issues are. And so I think it's hard to answer those questions until we can define what affordability actually is.
Well, I want to say, go ahead.
Yeah, and I want to, you know, in affordable housing, a lot of the times people have to be documented as well. Yeah. And so I just want to bring that out there because when we talk about affordability, it's not only how much do you make, but it's like, are you documented? Can you live here, right? Even if you have lived here for 20 plus years. And just to mention home ownership, I think it's it's an option and things of that sort. But I remember earlier in the show we talked a a little bit about housing, and someone showed a video or something where they were talking about how they were like, they're offering me money to sell my house, right? I want to hold on to my house because I got it for $15K, but they're offering me all this money. And so that's happening everywhere, right? So there is a root cause of like, how do we make sure that homeowners who are people of color, who have been in Oakland, get to keep their house, even when they are struggling, when they are trying to keep, send their kids to college and stuff like that. Because it is a big issue. We're getting a lot of people, saying, hey, I'll give you $600K in cash tomorrow if you give me your house. So we should start thinking about that as well when we talk about home ownership, is how do we keep those folks here? That's right.
And giving homeowners tax breaks. There's a lot of older homeowners that end up selling because they can't afford to repair their home. Or, for example, after my grandmother passed, we couldn't afford to purchase her home because of all the repair that goes behind it. But if the city had a program, and I know that there's programs out there that do exist, but again, Band-Aids, like offering a real tax break to people to where they can actually upgrade their home so they can stay, and information and education for adults. A lot of people feel that home ownership is unattainable just because they don't know how to purchase a home or have the information about finances to put down your down payments and everything. And so the access to information for people to actually purchase a home and find out ways that they can save money is very needed.
Back here, I have a question.
So Shereen, I want to go back to your earlier point from the quote you had about the city. It's how do we find spaces to define what a city should be or means? I used to work at a real estate consultancy, and I realized that the planners or people who would give advice to the cities, organizations like Spur, often are constituted by young white middle-class individuals, and their advice is always build more. But then we realized that building more, it takes about 50 years for a regular housing complex to become affordable. So it's how do we couple pro-growth, pro-building growth in addition to profitability. So it's a matter of how to define truly what we want a city to be. Because oftentimes it seems like those organizations like SPOR, what they're trying to fight against is saying, hey, they're very high income earners that can come into the city and then push people out. So we might as well just build to ensure that they don't push people out. But what that ultimately does is pushes everyone at the bottom out. So it seems as if they're trying to protect the middle class from really high income earners, but there's really no one trying to protect anyone who's neither middle class or extremely high income.
Wow, that's interesting.
I know, I'm like, where are my notes? I have to write that down.
Now, but also something that I think is interesting, is that when was the last time in whatever city, that you heard of a Burnham plan, like, or a Robert Moses, not that these people who think, multi-generationally, really big plans about cities, and when you look at the plans that now, yeah, exactly. When you think about, city planning and actually planning the city, I feel like that's the thing that was for a couple of centuries ago. But that's just me. I'm an executive journalist myself too.
I would say that the amount of money we need or you need to pull off those projects now is so astronomical that it's hard to see that coming. I also wanted to address the Spur comment. Spur was in San Francisco. Are they headquartered in Oakland now, or they just have an office here? They're headquartered, yeah. I mean, when I saw that happen, I was like, oh, snap. This is not good. And I what I see is like it's I don't have a name for it, but it's like this new school city planning that's come out in the last 10 years, and I don't want to step on toes of bike activists, but I'll just step on them. When I see bike lanes, it's a symbol for gentrification. That's my personal take. People can disagree. I know people do, but that's just what I see. And bikes are great. I think it's important to have certain paths for people to commute and what have you on bicycles. But it's what we're seeing is curb cuts and trees and stuff like that. It's now they're literal symbols for developers. Come here, so in Fruitvale, resist that. You know, in West Oakland, resist that. And I know it's counterproductive, and people say, well, why can't we just improve our areas? And why can't we build and greenify things? Well, you can, but you're probably not going to be here in 5 years. And the greatest example that I saw from beginning to end was in San Francisco in Hayes Valley, the Octavia Boulevard. And was like, oh, the Octavia Boulevard is so great. Well, and I was at a lot of the meetings, a lot of the older gay activists that helped take down that freeway, get that all done, they were renters, and they can't afford to live there now. The people that created it are gone. And so greenification, big city planning, visionary projects, they're great, but we have to be incredibly careful about where they're leading us.
And I want to acknowledge that this is a privileged space, right? Because we get to have the time to have this conversation. But I think we have to have these conversations with the people that can't be here, right? And we have to have it in conversations of like, yes, right? Like we want bike lanes for people to be able to get to work and be able to commute. We want more lighting in our streets and things of that sort. But you know, when I talk to my clients, a lot of them say like, I saw this happening. You know, I saw people out in the streets. I saw people like getting evicted right next door to me, but I didn't think this was going to happen to me, right? And it's until we start having those conversations one-on-ones around like what this means and what development means in our cities that we then get to make those connections. With even in the bus, even like 5-minute conversations, we get to make those connections that are larger than the folks that like, you know, study this, the folks that have general conversations around this. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we're missing around people power, is that we sometimes ignore the folks that can't be in these conversations, but that have so much power and so much to say about this.
All right, a question out here.
It's actually not a question, just
I'll hold the mic.
More of a comment and information share. Just Michael, on your point about just getting more engaged, new leadership. There's a new organization website called runforsomething.net, and they're really trying to get behind millennials, new leadership, new ideas, and I just wanted to spread that word. I just came across it the other day, someone shared it. But I think ultimately that's really what is going to be required here to create change. We really need the new leadership and the young people to get involved.
And in the meanwhile, the city needs to bring more people to the table. So there's an interim step where we can be working more closely with the communities that are impacted by the decisions that the city makes. And that's a very important step of the equity work that my department does, is looking at community engagement in a different way, in a completely different way, about who is it that knows the problem, understands the problem, and may have a lot of the solutions within the community. Now, I think that there is a tension between needing to put more resources into things and this idea about building the city up. And I think we're going to come up against that. And because it's like we need resources for everything, for schools and everything. And resources don't come from nowhere. They just don't fall from the sky. They have to come from tax dollars. They have to come from something. And most of the tax dollars that are available, that have been made available to us, even for building low-income housing, is in the form of property tax in the state of California. The tax system in the state of California is completely messed up. And so the schools are broke, and the roads are broken, and we don't have enough money for low-income housing, and all these things. That the tax system in this state got dismantled intentionally and incrementally while voters let it happen, right? And so I'm just going to go back to, yes, there's demonstrating in the street, and then there is actually not just running for something, but showing up and holding and showing up at the ballot box and holding people accountable for doing what you want them to do instead of doing things to you that you don't want them to do. Because that's not just affecting communities of color, it has affected almost everybody in this state, that the tax system is working the way that it's working right now.
Time check. How's everybody feeling?
One question. Well, we got one question here. You want to stand up?
As I see like more development going up in my neighborhood, like they're trying to build a 24-story luxury tower off West Mac. And as I see that, and I look at like the numbers, I see that it's like only like 13% like Section 8. Do you guys think that there are like laws and regulations that could be put in place, say like 25% Section 8, tiered affordability, and then a certain percentage market rate? Do you think there's like laws that can be put on like after X units for like big development, it has to be like super big affordable housing, and then or something like that? Do you think there's like laws that could impact?
I believe the city council can vote and request a higher percentage of affordability. Then the question becomes, at what point do developers stop wanting to build something?
But when it comes to that, by the way, there's an interactive map. It's called urbandisplacement.org. And if you click on the policy tools of the map, there's anti-displacement policies in a bunch of different cities. And if you click on Oakland, you can see all of the anti-displacement policies that they have. And Oakland doesn't have anti-displacement policies in two main areas: exclusionary zoning and density bonus ordinances, which I think actually is what you're talking about right there. So if I suggest that everybody go and look at this map. It is urbandisplacement.org. Just educate yourself. It's the Urban Displacement Project at UC Berkeley, and they're mapping gentrification and displacement all over the Bay. And they can tell you what policies are in place and what policies aren't, where other places have those policies, and where they don't. And what did I say it was? urbandisplacement.org. So yeah.
I got two questions. They're gonna have to be quick, so get my attention. Who's there? You, and one more. All right.
It's not a
I'll hold it
question,
back.
partially an answer to what he said. It's the state that is preventing the cities from upping the percentage of low-income units. So Costa-Hawkins, which is a bill that was passed by the legislature, I think in 1980, and the follow-up to it was a court decision, stops cities from being able to say we want so many units to be low income. So there is now a fight being led by people at Tenants Together to get rid of Costa-Hawkins. But that's just something that around the state people are going to have to do.
All right, anyone else? All right, stand up.
Can I help?
No.
Okay. All right, well, hi everyone. I'm a high school student here in Oakland. I go to Skyline. And so I've done a lot of research about gentrification. I've read How to Kill a City. I've been to a bunch of meetings about gentrification, and I've learned a lot about it. So my question is, it seems in Oakland that we're going to be, Oakland has become a very attractive and desirable place to live, and people are going to want to keep on coming here, and we can't just build a wall around Oakland and say, hey, you can't live here. But how do we improve the lives of the people that are already here without displacing them? And that's just a question that I've kind of thought of, because we can build bike lanes, we can make the lake nicer, but then what happens when we do that? The people whose lives were going to be improved by that end up being displaced and evicted from their homes. And so my question is, how do we improve our cities without displacing them? And
that is the
that is the $1 million question, my friend. That is, you find that out, you will all make a lot of money. But let's
this isn't really an answer. But at gentrifiers, I don't know if you guys are here, but it's okay. The things that you guys like, not you guys, but the things that gentrifiers like about Oakland are not going to be here after they're done with it. Like, by the time you've moved in, you've unpacked all your boxes, you've got all of your little mason jars on your shelf. You're going to look out of your window and you're not going to see the Oakland that you really, really wanted, because the things that make Oakland special and the things that make Oakland attractive are the types of people that are being pushed out. So I think that it's really important that, it incentivizes people coming in to make sure that they do so in a mindful way, to make sure that when they come in, they're not calling the police on their churches for playing loud music every Sunday as they have for the past 100 years, to make sure that they're not, calling the police on the drummers at the park, and all of these different things that dilute the culture of Oakland. Don't go to your Ethiopian restaurant and complain about it being too spicy, because that's the thing that makes Oakland special. So it's just really important that people are mindful of what their actions are doing in Oakland. You have to learn how to become part of a community. Otherwise, your community is not going to be there, and then you're going to have to go gentrify someplace else.
and you spent a lot of money on this place, and I have to leave. So,
can I say one of the things is like, I'm not from Oakland, but if I say one thing is like, be careful about calling the police for like your minor infractions. Like that's like a thing that like I think brown people understand is like someone's popping off fireworks. The first call is not 911. It's like just this no, but that is a real issue and a real problem. Is that it's the way people view their space. But anyway,
I would say respect Oakland. That's all we want. Respect us and respect the city. Don't come here trying to change the cultural makeup of a city. Even though some people might live here, you're still a guest. And when you're a guest somewhere, you find ways to be of service to the home of people that you're occupying, right? Of course, we can't build a wall, but people could come here with respect. And like Sonai said, that's not calling the police, not snitching on people who are walking down the street. And some of the saddest things about gentrification is that we feel like guests now. We are the outsiders, and I don't know about everyone else here, but sometimes I feel like the more that more we resist, the more stuff gets shut down. I have no issues with bikes. I love bikes. I ride, but if I can't ride in East Oakland on evenly paved streets, what's the point of riding over here? That means that it's not for me, and it's not for the people who have been riding bikes, right? We Oaklanders, we love to ride, but we also don't want to run over potholes and not get thrown over our handlebars because we hit a pothole. And for some of you here who might be gentrifiers and think that Oakland, is so nice, drive past, drive past the lake, drive past the Laurel, drive past Seminary, and go into the deep and take East 14th, known as International, and actually see what Oakland actually still looks like. East Oakland is like one of the last, frontiers, and it's being gentrified also. So I want to say that it's not completely, but if you want to see what Oakland looked like prior to this, drive down East 14th. And when I say East 14th, between like 69th and go to San Leandro from there, and you'll be able to see there's no businesses, everything is shut down and closed. But what I notice is there's no for lease or for rent signs, which tells me you have abandoned buildings which is already purchased, just sitting and waiting. And so those are things that you could do. Get involved. Talk to people. Find out why we so angry. And we'll tell you. But one thing I'll say is I'm hella passionate about this city, and I love this city. And what makes it so sad is I won't recognize it in 5 years. I won't remember what that building used to be because it was torn down. I won't remember what that building used to be because it's gone. And being a foreigner in my hometown.
Well, I have to thank everyone for coming out, spending your Thursday night, especially Shereen. We're friends, and there was like, I got a 3 a.m. text, was like, why are we doing this? I am so busy. So like, I want to look at it.
But it was important, not that it wasn't
No. But no, I want to thank each of you, and especially I think about your store is one of like really inspired me. I was just like randomly in it, and I'm just like for like 30 or 40 minutes I bought Shereen a handbag from there, and it was like it is a thing that the thing that I think about is, are you coming to be a part of things and to be a part of our community? Is, as a friend said, are you coming to change it? If you're coming and join the party, seems to be like, come, if you want to join the party, that's one thing. If you're like, you want to change the party, then that might be another thing. So thank all of the panelists.
Thank you.
Jamie Tanner, Shereen Flynn, Michael O'Connor, Selene Sawa, and Sonari. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm going to say, if you're on, donate. There's a donate table. There's merch in the back. It's youthradio.org/donate. Please, that's very important to support the work. If you don't like the tenor of journalism now, help us raise journalists that are better than us, and that's what we do here. Shereen is at Radio Meraji, and I'm at Mirage, and I am at Sonari. I want to thank Marlene Milliken. Thank you so much for your help. I want to thank the audio staff and the video staff, and there are two Heathers who helped so much. I am so grateful for NPR is lucky to have this relationship, and we're so glad that you came out tonight. Thank you. The conversation does not end now.
No.
Does not end.
Keeps going.
Please engage us on social media if you want to argue with something I said or something like that. Please do. Let the conversation continue. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.